Let's do the slammer. There we go, nose up, into the basket. Well, hey folks, today I want to talk about a very important part of the game that I think a lot of people neglect. You see, we all know how important it is to work on our putting, and we all want to drive farther and better and, you know, just get better and crush the disc. But I think for most of us mere mortals, the place that we can get the most points taken off of our score to do better is our approach shots. And we're not working on those, or we're getting tunnel vision of how we approach, and it's hurting us. I've even seen that the pros playing on the tour will get focused on one sort of approach, and I think we need to have a well-rounded idea of how to do approach shots. And we're going to talk about it right after the intro. Okay, so here's the deal. We all tend to get in the habit of what we're most comfortable with. And most of the time, that's really good because we can lean on it, we can relax. And for me, my approach shots, I want to do a nice hyzer shot in like this. But there are times when that's the worst shot I could do because there's stuff in the way it's going to land. I need to adjust my game and not try to just force that shot every chance I get. I can count on it, but I need to know when not to count on it. And that's what I'm talking about. We get tunnel vision. We decide, we become very accurate with our forehand hyzer shot into the basket. And that's what you'll see a lot of pros. They're always going to go forehand approach shot into the basket so they can just drop it in there. But then they'll get some obstacles, trees, or there'll be a terrain situation, and they'll still try to force that shot in. Whereas they would simply just, instead of doing the forehand, they just turn around and do an hyzer backhand, the disc will react completely different. Remember, spin is going to be very important in your approach shot, especially when you're trying to get near and stay near the basket. Because here's one of the things that's a problem with both the forehand hyzer drop in and the backhand hyzer drop in and the forehand hyzer drop in. They're great, but they're going to be diving and actually kind of speeding up as they're coming to the ground, and they're going to want to hit and dig and roll. Sometimes that's great when you need to get around something and have it keep kind of going towards the basket. But what if you need to land softly? These are hard to make land soft. Trying to get a forehand spike hyzer to land soft, it's not possible because it's going to come crashing in. Same thing with the backhand spike hyzer. Now you could try to do a backhand floaty, but most of the time what that is actually is you're doing a floaty, you're getting the nose up and you're getting a little hyzer. And how many of us work on our hyzer floating forehands and backhands? We tend to just want to lean into one thing, and usually it's that hyzer. Drop that hyzer in. It's an easier shot. It's a very predictable shot, but we need to expand our horizons. And the reason why is you can land a disc softer when it's on hyzer, when it's countering the spin that it naturally wants to do. What do I mean by that? Well, so I'm going to take this disc and I'm going to throw it on hyzer. The disc is spinning this way, and what's it going to want to do when it finishes and when it starts to slow down? It's going to want to dive back this way. Well, so if I throw it on hyzer, the dive is going to take it and bring it to flat before it drops off this way. And so we've got two things going for us. We're counteracting the spin in some ways, so it's going to be a little bit slower as it's hitting the ground. It's not going to try to jump as much. But also, if we do it right, we're going to get the disc to land flat. So it's not going to be hitting an edge and skipping. It's going to be plopping. I say that all the time. I want that disc to plop by the basket. That also allows us to run at the basket and not just throw it near the basket. Because let's face it, if you try to run towards the basket with a spike hyzer, forehand or backhand, you've got to come in and hit it at this angle. But if you miss short or long, it's hitting and skipping out there. Whereas if you throw an hyzer forehand or backhand that comes in and is counteracting and it's stabling up and it's getting flat and it's going to go this way, even if you miss, it's going to glide by the basket and it's usually going to hit pretty flat near the basket. And so I'm going to show you some of these shots over here. But what I want you to start thinking about is how you can incorporate more hyzer shots into your approach shots, because I think it's going to really help you get closer to the basket so you don't have to worry so much about putting. I'll let you in on a little secret. The reason why I got so good at throwing those hyzer approach shots is because my putting was terrible. This is before I started flick putting, and I needed to get as close to the basket as possible. When your putting stinks, you got to compensate it with something else. And being able to lay that disc right up by the basket saved my bacon a lot of times. So I'm gonna go out here. Let's talk about these shots a little bit. All right, now I'm not gonna go super far out for a couple reasons. One is so you can see the shots. Two, to stay in the shade. Three, to protect my arm. But we don't need to, you can just extrapolate this out farther if you need to. Just use your brain and think we're gonna expand this out. But so here's where my disc lands, and I need to get to the basket. Well, from right here, it's dealer's choice. I can throw this any way I want. And I've got an array of discs from a pig to a Berg X to a harp to a birdie. And any of these would be great. I can come up, I got the harp, and just throw a nice little soft spike forehand. That's not spike, that's just a forehand hyzer into the shot. Or I can come with my Berg X, do the same thing over here. Just throw a little hyzer, let it curl up in there. Now, you can already see right now, because of the ground, I'm throwing these very soft, but there's pine straw and a little bit of a slope. So they're skidding past the basket a little bit. You always got to be aware of what your shot is doing when it lands too. Okay, so now, let's try. I'm going to take a very overstable zone, and I'm just going to, I've got to watch these limbs over here. You know, that's always going to, whatever you've got the biggest gap, that's usually the line you want to throw. So even though I've got this branch over here, I've got plenty of room over here, I'm just gonna take this and throw this on edge and just let it float and plop, hopefully. And you see, I got closer to the basket on that one. I actually gave it a little run, and it only went a little bit farther than the other ones. Now that's a zone, and I wouldn't normally run with a zone because I haven't thrown it a lot. So it's a little bit less touchy for me. What I'd actually do is use my Berg or my birdie, but I'm gonna hold that for a second. Let me do one more. I'm just gonna throw this on anhyzer, a little nose up, so it's gonna come out here and it's gonna float and it's gonna drop at the basket. And then it's gonna have a nice, it's gonna settle nicely. Now, to be honest, one of the reasons why I like to do the forehand is because I like to be able to throw it up higher. The problem is, this would negate a lot of that for me to run at the basket from here because of those branches. And see, if I wanted to force it, I could go, oh, maybe I could find a little slot right there, but that's dumb play. I could counteract that by getting down on my knees, I'm gonna get, and try to slide up underneath here. As a matter of fact, I'm gonna try it. Let's do this. And this is not gonna punish me if I get down low enough. I've just gotta make sure I keep under those branches. So now I'm gonna do a little anhyzer with the nose up so that it rides out and hopefully dies and drops towards the basket. Now, I do have a tailwind that's gonna kind of push it and try to slide a little bit more. I kind of wimped it, but did you see it was gonna stop right near the basket again? Let's try that again. I'm gonna use the old pig, all right? Ah, did you see I caught the limb? That's the problem, is I want to get that height and my body is naturally gonna wanna lift up to throw a higher shot. So even though those branches shouldn't be in there, my mistake is gonna be to hit those branches. So as much as I like this, if I'm going to try to semi-run at the basket, I'm probably not gonna throw this shot. I'm gonna turn around here because the gap's wide open and try to throw a floaty backhand anhyzer. Did you see how close that came? And it just stopped right behind the basket. All right, one more. The other thing I could do, if I'm just trying to get near the basket, I'm not going for the basket, well then this makes all the sense in the world. I'm just gonna do a little skip shot because of the ground. Nailed it. Hit that pine cone, threw it like crap. But what I'm trying to say here is you've got to decide what's the best shot for that situation. Even if your body is saying, I like this the best, it may not be the best shot. And you've got to go, okay, that's no problem. I've practiced the other 3 shots. They're really 3 shots. There's the backhand hyzer, backhand anhyzer. Boy, I'm so brilliant today. So backhand hyzer, backhand anhyzer, forehand hyzer, forehand anhyzer. And you really need to try to work on being very confident in all 4 of those because there are going to be different situations when you're going to need to throw one of those shots over the other. And if you're always just throwing forehand hyzer, forehand hyzer, forehand hyzer, you're going to get to a shot where you're going to need to throw backhand and hyzer, or you're gonna need to throw forehand and hyzer, and it's gonna feel weird, and you're gonna lock up and probably gonna hit a tree or gack it or whatever. So before you get out on the tournaments or play when there's pressure, you need to come out and practice all of those. Get a bag, start working on your forehands. Go get them, start working on your anhyzer backhands. Then go get them, backhand hyzer, and then forehand and hyzer. And after a while, each one of them will feel comfortable. So all you're doing is walking up and assessing what's the smartest play, what's the smartest shot that I can do here, that I can get as close to the basket and hopefully run at it and still stay close. A lot of it will depend on terrain, and I'll show you about that in just a minute. Okay, sorry guys, I lied. Before we talk about terrain, I want to talk about anhyzer a little bit more, because one of the things you're going to start noticing is the guys that have the great touch, especially in their approaches and stuff like that, tend to use anhyzer shots. And the reason why is a hyzer is a one angle shot that is always going to be coming in at that angle. It's going to be hitting the ground at that angle. Where an anhyzer shot, if you control it, you can get that disc to land on any type of angle. And let me show you what I'm talking about. Okay, so here's an overstable zone. Now, depending on how I throw it, I can get this disc to land, just sweep by the basket, almost like it just stayed on hyzer the whole time. Now, the problem with that is if I hit on edge like this, what's happening? Well, that disc is spinning like this, and it's going to turn into a wheel and cut roll. I hardly ever want that, but it's also nice to know how to do it. But anything else, if I hit it and it started to come out and it hits like this, it's going to hit the ground and it's just going to dig and try to die right there. So I can take this, put it on edge, drop it by the basket, and if I miss, it should just stop. But I can also, if I throw a little flatter, what's it going to do? Go out there, and it's just going to act almost like a hyzer shot. So I have the ability to get this disc to land on any angle, depending on how much snap, spin, and angle I put it on to begin with. Whereas with a hyzer, I've got one angle and one angle only. Okay, so now in my mind, I'm thinking I'm going to go up out here, let this disc fly out, it's going to flatten out, and it's going to plop near the basket. Now, because I'm hot and lazy, I'm doing this where there's some tree limbs. So ideally, I'd have a little more airspace to do this, but just play along with me because I'm old and I don't want to go stand out in the sun. All right, so that's why you see me a lot of times, I'll kind of start to squat down, just get a little more airspace. All right. So did you see it? It came out, it floated, and it just ran by the basket. I thought I actually hit the basket, and it just went by it, and it's 10 feet by the basket. Now I can make that putt, but I gave myself a chance to hit that. And if you've watched my videos, I make a lot of those shots because I'm comfortable throwing that anhyzer and running by the basket, and it's not going to go too far. If you prefer the backhand, I could step over here and do the same thing, and it's the same principle. If I release it like this, I can get it to where it's going to land on this edge, or I could get it all the way to where it's going to drop back on this edge. And I can have it land anywhere in between simply by changing the angle, the nose angle, and the snap. And so anhyzers give you so much more control of the actual flight of the disc than hyzer. Hyzers are a one-shot, very, very blunt force. I'm just going to throw it at the basket, and they're very predictable. Where an anhyzer takes touch and control and understanding the breaking point of your disc, and that means where it goes before it will start to dump out, so that you can then hit that spot where it dumps at the right time to go right back at the basket. Okay, Toro, same thing as the zone. I was a little softer on that, but did you see how it just came out? It started to straighten up, it just flattened out and plopped right by the basket. That's why overstable approach discs are so useful. First of all, they're so controllable for your regular hyzer shot, but for these approach shots, overstable heart. I'm releasing that on this kind of angle, and it's flattening out, and it's landing flat right by the basket. One of the reasons why I like the Berg is I don't have to adjust so much. I don't have to give it as much angle for it to flatten out. I can give it some angle. I can just put it out like this and trust it's going to go pretty straight and then just plop. It's not going to get too squirrely. So I push that one out just a little bit. But you see how softly and easily those are landing by the basket. All right, let's try the entropy. Oh, I threw that low. You see, I threw it low, I got the nose down, and it hit and wanted to skip. I need to make sure I get the nose up. Let's do the slammer. There we go, nose up, into the basket. All right, we'll try the pig. Oh, just missed it. But all of these, we'll go show how far they are. From right here, I'm running at the back, I'm legitimately aiming at the basket. I'm not just trying to get near the basket. And if I miss, I've usually got a pretty easy shot right back at the basket. All right, the reason why I like the birdie and the berg is a little more blunt, but the birdie just kind of floats. I don't have to give it as much juice, but it's just gonna float up there and it's gonna come in nice and soft. You see how I just kind of gave it a flick and it just came out road and just cruised over to the basket. All right, let's go see where these guys are. All right, so out of the 8 through, 1 is in the basket, and then they go out a little farther. Now, you see this is the perfect, if you can see the ground, it's perfect pine straw, dried out. This is almost like linoleum here. So these are almost the worst case scenario of how far these went. Plus, I just kind of gotten out here. So I'm not making excuses, but I'm saying you can get closer, just warm up a little bit, and these should all just be almost drop-ins. This is my worst one, and it's a little touchy, especially when you miss it. But then you got these. And like I said, you warm up a little bit, you're playing, and you're just dropping these near the basket. And so most of the time, my shots are usually, I'm aiming to stay in this kind of circle right here. I'm really trying to stay in bullseye. And that takes so much pressure off your game if you can consistently throw approaches that get near here. Okay, now, if I've got enough time, we're gonna talk about the terrain, but this may be going long already. I'll see when I get in the editing room, but let's go talk about terrain. Maybe I'll add it to something else. Well, all right, well, I found some shade, but it's probably putting me in silhouette, but really, hey, you see my face enough, you don't need, that doesn't matter. But walking over here to talk about terrain, the thing that really kept hitting in my head is understanding breaking point. And you need to understand the breaking point of your disc. Another way to say it is understand the flippiness or the stability of your disc and where and how you need to throw it to get it to land how you want it to. Does that make sense? For instance, if I'm throwing my pig, let's change that. If I'm throwing this entropy, which is very overstable, if I throw it at that basket and I want it to land flat at the basket from here, and I'm throwing a forehand and hyzer shot, I need to understand what angle, both vertical angle and nose angle, I need to throw it, and with how much snap and what direction to get it to go out, curve, settle down, and plop and land at the basket. So in essence, I know in my head, I know how stable this disc is. So I know that I need to put it out here, and I need to put it on this angle with this nose angle, so it's gonna come out, it's gonna hit that breaking point and start coming back, and by the time it gets to the basket, it's gonna land flat. So mentally, I know what angle and what speed I need to put this on because I understand the breaking point of this disc. In other words, I understand the stability of this disc. And that's why I prefer overstable discs for approach shots most of the time over understable. Now, I do love my birdies, but I also know what it's doing. I'm not putting on much angle. I'm just throwing it out here and letting it draw across. But as soon as there's wind or something else, I go to my berg or something else more stable. Or if I have to throw from farther out, because the more speed you put on it, the more it's gonna curl over. So overstable will handle that even better. So most of the time, I encourage people to find a good overstable approach disc that they can just learn how to get that shot and make all 4 kinds of shots with that, forehands and backhands, and hyzer, and get really comfortable just taking that shot and being able to drop it right by the basket with all 4 of those shots. Okay, let's talk breaking point one more time. You see this basket is on like a turtle shell. It's on a mound. So if I throw a forehand hyzer in like this, as long as I hit the left side, I'm okay. But if I hit it with too much of an angle, what's gonna happen? It's gonna pick up and roll off the hill. If I throw too high and it goes past the basket, what's gonna happen is it's gonna hit the back side of the hill and want to skip off or roll off the hill too. So I've got a very tight window to hit this forehand hyzer. I can do it. Ideally, I throw real high and spike and it just comes straight down and bonks. But instead of doing that, what if I take and I throw an anhyzer, get it out there, float, and it drops right at the basket. Even if I miss to the left, it's dropping flat, or if I miss to the right, it's dropping pretty flat. I'm okay, it's not gonna go too far. Let's see if I can do it. Now, you do know how hard it is to demonstrate these on one shot right after you've talked for 5 minutes, but let's see if we can do it. Of course, here comes the wind. That's why you want something a little more stable too. Let's see if I can do it. Up, now it's flattening out, flattening out. See how softly that landed by the basket? Hopefully my big fat head wasn't in the way. Let's try it again. Same thing with the harp. See, I put down the birdie because with this wind, I wouldn't want to throw that into the wind. But with the harp, I'm gonna need to throw it right out here so it draws across and floats. Comes around, oh, I overcooked it, but it's landing flat on the backside of the hill. There's no chance of it skipping a little bit farther down. So it's got more room for error. Yep, I think I can see the basket. It's so tiny. Let's try that again with the Toro. See, I'm using the anhyzer and the stability of the disc to dial in how I want the disc to land. I've got full control. I could have it land like this. I could chunk it up like this and have it dive in extra hard, almost like it's a spike hyzer. Or I could throw it flat and let it dive off this way. But I'm wanting to dial it so that it's coming in, little nose up, and just plopping right at the basket. See the stability take over? And it's just gliding right by the basket. I'm not saying this has to be your #1 thing, but practice that because it's gonna get you closer to the basket. You're gonna feel more confident. You're gonna be able to recover from poor drives because you're in the woods, but you can still get right up by the basket. No pressure, plop it right in the basket. So understand that it's not just what's my most comfortable shot, but what kind of terrain am I throwing it in? So this is where, for me, it's more comfortable to have a little bit less stable disc for the backhand anhyzer, just because this is old school and I'm old school. So same thing here. If I'd step up, I want to do this out here and just let it draw across and plop by the basket. Ride, 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 ride. I gave it a good run. I pushed it a little long, but did you see? Right by the basket, and it still stopped as soon as it hit the other side. So it gives you more options. Let me try one more. One of the reasons why I like the Berg is it doesn't have quite as much glide, so I can do the same thing and plop it a little bit closer to the basket, hopefully. Oh, all right. See what happened there? I got the nose up too high and I just pulled it over. But even that, because it's stabling out, it's pulling back. I overcooked it this way, but because it's anhyzer, that miss was bringing it back closer to the center. So it actually mitigated some of my miss throw. All right, let's try good old pig. And I'll be honest, I'm out of practice with these because I'm throwing so many of my forehands, but you see, I need to practice that. So many times you need to get around something this way and you don't need to be throwing a spike in this way. You want to do it softly. Let me try it one more time. I need this just as much as y'all do. Oh, I got the nose up, so it's gonna land and plop, but I didn't quite get it enough to run at the basket. Last one. Nose up, drop right on top of it. Oh, wind got it. It was gonna land and the wind just grabbed it and carried it out a little bit. But there you go. I hope that makes sense. The #1 thing I want you to walk away from this is practice all 4 types of approach shots and know when you get up to your disc, look for the best one that's gonna give you your best chances. And if you practice all 4 of them, you won't get in a tunnel vision of, I've only got 1 shot I can make. That's gonna help you be able to get out, get around stuff, and make some great approach shots right up by the basket, and hopefully your score's gonna go down, and people are gonna go, what did you do? And all you've done is work on your approach shots. Well, there you go, guys. I hope that helps. Hope to see you out on the course.